A couple of days ago, I made a video talking about how to buy a car for a below market value price in 2022. And in that video, I walked through the process of how you can actually identify buying a used car for a really good deal, like figuring out which car you want to buy, navigating the correct platforms in order to find those cars, and then some of the red flags that you should look for whenever you're actually making this purchase. Well, in that video, I got a number of different questions regarding how I decide a car is worth buying. And that is exactly what I want to talk about today. Because though I've discussed virtually every single step of the Turo scaling and business building process, I actually haven't really talked about some of the red flags that will deter me from looking at a car at all. So in this video, we're going to be going through a number of different vehicle listings that I found for sale online. And I'm going to be breaking down whether these are cars that I would buy or I would pass on and why that's the case. So at the end of this video, you should have a pretty decent idea of some of the different red flags and some of the things that you should look out for and be aware of. That way you don't buy any duds for your own Turo fleet. So let's get started. Now, I do want to note that I do have a vlog channel that I run with my fiance and business partner, HP. That channel takes you through and we really document the entire process of how we run, manage, and expand our Turo fleet. And on that channel, we've documented, I think, every single purchase that we've made over the last year. And so if you're really interested in learning like what we do, what our thought process is when buying a car in real time, I would highly encourage you to check out that video. It's a different vibe than this one. It's a ton of fun. I absolutely love it. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will include some links down in the description below so that you can check out those videos. But like I mentioned in the intro, in this video, I want to talk about some of the red flags that will deter me from looking at a vehicle in person. There are ones that will take an appealing car and make them something that I simply want to avoid. Or on the flip side of the coin, it's vehicles that may have some things wrong with them, but these are things that I am willing to overlook for the sake of buying the vehicle. So I'm going to be going over my exact process in this video. But before we dig into my computer, there are a few things to keep in mind. Number one is the fact that I buy all of my cars for Turo. So because of that, these cars have to be 130,000 miles or less, and they have to be 12 years old or newer. Of course, if you are wanting to buy cars for the sake of renting them out on Turo, you would want to also adhere to those guidelines. But if you were wanting to buy a car to rent out on GetAround or to use for personal use, then you would be able to adjust those filters in those guidelines accordingly. For this demonstration today, we're not really going to be paying attention to price. In fact, I'm probably just going to disregard it altogether because what I want to talk about today isn't how you buy a car at a certain price. It's instead how to identify flaws that could be big deal breakers for you long term. So though price is of course a huge factor whenever you're looking to buy a car, I don't really want to focus on that today. But enough talking, let's actually dive into my computer and let's go over some real world examples. The first one being this 2015 Toyota Yaris. Now, this is an example of a car that I would absolutely not hesitate to buy, at least from a purely cosmetic standpoint. Looking at the car is really, really clean. It looks very cosmetically sound. It doesn't have a whole lot of issues. There isn't any significant scratches or dents. There is one piece of damage on the rear bumper, which you can see right here. But to be honest, this is something that would not deter me from buying the car whatsoever. The thing about buying below market value economical cars is the fact that it's going to be really hard to find a car that is absolutely flawless. In fact, in my own head, I don't really know that HP and I have ever purchased a truly flawless car. If you want flawless, then you better get new. Otherwise, you're going to have to settle for some dents, dings, and scratches. In this case, the scratch is pretty secluded to the rear bumper. It's not anything that I don't think could be buffed out. And even if it couldn't be buffed out, I wouldn't be worried about it. It's very normal for some of the cars that we buy to have minor dents, dings, and scratches. And as long as it doesn't bring the overall quality of the car down too significantly, and as long as we're able to get the car for a solid price, then a cosmetic damage, a cosmetic defect like this would not deter us from buying the car at all. You go into the interior and the interior is black, which is exactly what I look for. I really like dark interiors because it just hides wear and tear better than tan interiors. And so for this reason, this I think is a perfect example of a car that I have purchased many times, and it is a car that I will probably continue to purchase many times over. The next one that I want to look at is a Ford Fiesta. Now keep in mind that I typically do not buy Ford Fiestas. The reason being is because Fiestas have a really bad, notorious history for their horrible transmissions. Now, if you are somebody who's getting involved with Turo and you're looking for these lower end economy cars that are $6,000 or less or under $10,000, it is not a matter of if you're going to run into a Ford Fiesta that you're going to look at buying. It's a matter of when. These cars are so readily available, they're extremely cheap, and they're really good looking cars, all things considered. But they are cheap for a reason, and a big reason for that is because of their horrible transmissions and their poor reliability. So if you see a Ford Fiesta, I would advise against buying one unless the transmission has been rebuilt. In fact, HP and I just recently bought a 2011 Ford Fiesta that we purchased because of the fact it had recently had a rebuilt transmission. But I want to show this today purely because cosmetically this car is extremely good. So this is a 2012 Ford Fiesta. You look around the car, it is absolutely flawless. It looks very, very clean. No dents, dings, scratches. The photos are really solid as well. There are interior photos showing a dark interior. It features automatic locks, automatic windows, really everything that you could want from a Turo vehicle. I showed this car not because I think you should go out and buy a Ford Fiesta. I instead show it because I think that this is a perfect example of what I would consider to be a perfect Turo vehicle to buy, at least from a cosmetic standpoint. Next up, we have a 2013 Hyundai. Now, first off, I want to point out this color, which is absolutely stunning. I love this color. It looks incredibly, incredibly good. So it is like a Tiffany blue, it looks like, and I really, really like it. I'm a big fan of buying cars that are a unique color. I think that they do better than cars that are just black, gray, or white. In my experience, I've also found this to be the case as well. We have a green Mazda 2, which outperforms our other Mazda 2, and I think a big reason for that is that it's lime green. Now, looking at this car from an exterior standpoint, it is really, really good looking. I'm not a huge fan of these yellow headlights, but definitely wouldn't deter me from buying the car. From a cosmetic standpoint, it looks incredibly good. And I think that the black wheels, even though I think these are like the steely wheels, the black paired with the blue exterior looks really nice. The one sticking point though for me with this car is the interior, which you will see right now. And you'll see that it's not only tan, it's like almost a beige color, and it is so contrastingly different than the exterior. I am not a fan of cars with beige interiors. It's actually really interesting because a commenter commented on one of my previous videos stating that he actually looks for cars with tan interior because it makes it easier to identify where the car needs to be cleaned. Whereas with darker cars, it makes it harder to identify where the car needs to be cleaned. And I've never really thought about it through that lens. I thought that everybody just kind of unanimously didn't like tan interiored cars, but it doesn't seem to be the case. From a personal standpoint, I really like tan. I think that it looks really good, and in my own 4Runner, I have a tan interior. But for the sake of renting a car out on Turo, I've just learned that tan and beige interior does not hold up well. It shows wear and tear incredibly fast. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when somebody spills something in your car. It just makes it really difficult to keep the car looking new for as long as possible. So though I absolutely would look at buying this car, the tan interior definitely is a sticking point. It is a kind of negative tick for this car, but all in all, I think that this car is really solid and I would definitely look at buying it. Now, we talked about cars that I would buy despite some aspects of them I don't really love. Now let's talk about some cars that look like they could be good on the surface, but they simply have too many flaws that I couldn't overlook, and because of that, I would ultimately end up passing. So first up is a 2012 Kia Soul. This is being sold by a dealership and it has 130,000 miles. Now again, of course, if you're renting this car out for Turo, you would want to make sure that it actually has under 130,000 miles. Sometimes dealerships and car sellers will average it up, will round the number. And so you would want to confirm that this is in fact under 130,000 miles. But for the sake of this video, let's just pretend that it is. So looking at this car, it really doesn't look bad, but you just look around the vehicle and it just kind of looks a bit worn down. You can see here that there's some damage, some scratches over on this area. There's some more scratches over here. You can see that there's scratches on this like lower bumper area. And then if we continue to this side, you can see that this front fender, like the front bumper area here, it looks like it's almost been repainted, like it's not matching quite right. And you can see that there's a lot of damage like on this side. You can see it like as the fender and the bumper meet, as well as in this like fog light area. This is a really good example of a car that like is right on the cusp of being something that I would buy. Whenever I look at cars and if I see that there is just some damage in a secluded area, that's typically something that I can very easily overlook. But when it's minor damage spread throughout the entire car, that typically is something that I do have a problem with because it makes it significantly harder to fix that car. If you repaint it or if you touch up paint it, you're gonna have the car spotty everywhere. If you replace the body panels, you're gonna have to replace multiple body panels. So it's just very, very hard to fix if the damage is spread throughout the entire vehicle. For this reason, even though the car is on the surface, I think very clean, at this point in my Turo career, this is something I would probably pass on. Earlier in my Turo career, back in the day, whenever I was willing to invest more time and more money into getting cars Turo ready, it's probably something I would have bought. But at this point in time, I don't think I would, just because of the fact that there's a lot of minor damage spread throughout the entire car. You can even see some more damage up here. It's just simply too much. It wouldn't be something I would want to waste my time with, and for that reason, I would pass. Another example of a not so perfect car, but this one I would look to buy, is this Honda Insight. So this Honda Insight is really clean. The interior is spectacular looking. And the real flaw here that I see is the sun fading on the hood. This is something that you'll see. It's very, very common with like older, cheaper vehicles because of the fact that these cars are being driven, they're being stored outside, and thus they're sun fading. I have a number of cars with some sun fading on them, and though it definitely takes the aesthetics of the car down, it's not something that would deter me from buying the car simply because of the fact that I think renters understand that sun fading is just the reality of having an older car. It's something that's very, very common. Now, if this sun fading was peeling and it was exposing metal, this would be an entirely different story, but that doesn't look like it's the case here. It just looks like there's some minor sun fading on the hood. There's probably some on the roof as well, but overall the car looks really good, and I think that the interior makes up for the poor exterior because the interior honestly could not be much better. So next, let's look at some of the extreme examples of different cars that I would avoid and these cars that I just simply would not look at all. Some of these are a little bit extreme. They're ones that I wouldn't even humor, but for the sake of this video, we'll go through them. So right here, we have a 2014 Ford Focus. Ford Focuses have the same notorious history as Fiestas, so proceed with caution with anything like this. They do have transmission problems, which is why these cars are so cheap online. But you can see here, according to this Ford Focus listing, there's one photo. It doesn't show the entire car, and the portion of the car that it does show, it is damaged. In my experience, if a seller is not showing the entire car, there's probably a reason for that. You can see here that the passenger side like fender bumper area, the passenger side of the front end, is not being shown. I would be willing to bet that that was definitely intentional. They're trying to hide the significant amount of damage that's probably there, which is why they're only showing this portion. But even if this portion here was flawless, I still wouldn't buy this car because the hood is just simply a mess. Hoods are very expensive to fix. They're just logistically very difficult to fix. And so if a hood is damaged, especially to the extent of this one, it is, I would say 9 times out of 10, if not 9.9 times out of 10, it's a reason that I'll pass on the car altogether. So hoods can definitely be a deal breaker. And looking at this listing, the fact it's one photo, it's a poorly taken photo, and it doesn't show the entire car, this has red flags written all over it. Next, we have a 2011 Mercedes-Benz C300. This is a really, really sharp car. I have a 2009 Mercedes-Benz C300 that looks very similar to this one. And I've been looking for a Mercedes ever since I got mine because it's one of my best performing cars in the fleet. But Mercedes-Benz C300s are very hard to come by, especially ones that are in good condition at a reasonable price. Now, looking at the exterior of this car, it is truly perfect. Like, it looks extremely, extremely clean. But the problem with this is whenever you go into the interior, which you can see if we scroll down, and that is right here. The interior has like a rip here. It's like the vinyl has come off, and this is actually something that's very, very common. You'll see this quite a lot, and I've seen them in Lexuses, I've seen them in BMWs, Mercedes, these kind of higher end cars. This is where the significant amount of damage comes from. In fact, I would say the vast majority of very clean, like luxury cars like this that I look at, if there is significant damage, it's more often than not in the seat area right here. Whenever there's damage like this that in the interior that can really only be fixed by replacing the part, in this case replacing the entire seat, it's something that I will prevent me from buying the car altogether. Now, in this case, this car is 200,000 miles, so I couldn't buy this car even if I wanted to. But if I did want to buy this car, and if I theoretically could list it out on Turo, I would not buy this car purely because of this seat, because this seat will never be the same unless you replace it, and there's no guarantee that you'll be able to find a seat for this vehicle in a cost-effective way. It just simply isn't worth the hassle in my experience. Whenever I look at cars and whenever I see an issue that can't be fixed unless it's replaced, that's typically a big enough red flag for me to just skip over the car altogether. For example, recently HP and I went to go check out a 2013 Mazda 3. Whenever we had looked at the photos of the car, it looked really clean, but whenever we viewed it in person, there was some bubbling on the dash, and that bubbling deterred us from buying the car because the only way to fix that bubbling is to replace the dash, which is a really tough job and something we're not interested in. It's kind of the same thought process here. Despite the fact that this car is really clean, it aesthetically on the exterior looks great. That seat damage is just something I can't see past. Now for the last example, let's take a look at this 2013 Lexus. Now, again, this is a rebuilt title, but let's, for the sake of example, pretend like it's not. This car on the exterior looks extremely clean. The car is a really nice looking car, but as I'm going through the photos, you can see that the interior is pretty clean. It needs a good vacuuming, but it's pretty clean all the way around. But you can see that there's one glaring issue, and that is whatever is going on in this lower portion of the trunk lid. You can see if we zoom in, it looks like there's a piece of metal missing or it's been concaved. And even though this is a really small piece of damage, this is something that would deter me from buying the car, because the only way that you can fix this is if you replace this entire body panel, and that's something that is extremely, extremely expensive. And I almost guarantee that if you were to buy a car like this with this type of damage, every single renter is going to point it out to you, and it's something that will drastically affect your reviews, which is something I'm not interested in playing with. Now, ultimately, whenever it comes to finding cars that you want to buy for Turo and evaluating those cars on platforms like Facebook or Craigslist, it's all going to come down to what you personally are looking for and what your skill level will dictate. For example, HP and I have a lot of experience doing minor repairs and minor body work on cars, and so because of that, we feel really comfortable buying cars with a little bit of damage here and there. But if you're somebody that isn't comfortable with that at all, then your standard for which car you want to find might be different than ours. At the end of the day, you want to find a car that is within your comfort level and a car that you can easily buy and then turn around and list that car out on Turo. Now again, my typical rule of thumb is if damage is secluded to one area, if it can be fixed by either repairing or replacing the part relatively easily, then that's something that I absolutely will buy. If instead the damage is around the entire car or throughout the interior, if it's something that will require a lot of time, energy, and money to fix, if it's something that will require us to buy a dozen different parts to piecemeal the solution together, that's something that we're just simply not interested in doing. But with that being said, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.